This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, how is IT outsourcing going? What is the Great Resignation and how is it impacting work? Changes to cyber insurance. Congress's moves are becoming clearer while New York takes a step forward and one back. Microsoft's key language shift, plus the roundup of security issues you need to know, and the outcome of politics regarding cyber attacks. All this and more. Hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into this week's stories. Looks like that cyber incident reporting bill is coming. Senator Mark Warner previewed the bill to Axios, which is going to require critical infrastructure businesses, federal contractors, and agencies to report cyber incidents to the government, giving law enforcement and private sector partners the chance to get involved as soon as possible during an attack. Warner said that the bill would include limited immunity for businesses in connection with the reports, which would be kept confidential between the government and private sector partners. It's not the only bill coming. 5 others rolled out in draft on Friday. Ending Platform Monopolies Act, seeking to break up companies, making it illegal for online platforms to own businesses that are essentially conflicts of interest because they advantage their own products over those of competitors. The American Innovation and Choice Online Act would prevent Apple and Google from setting prices and conditions for app developers. The Platform Competition and Opportunity Act would ban big tech from purchasing competitors to remove them as threats. The Augmenting Compatibility and Competition by Enabling Service Switching, or Access Act, seeks to improve competition by forcing companies to let consumers move their personal data between platforms. And the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act funds the FTC and DOJ by charging higher fees for large mergers. In New York, the Senate there has passed the nation's first bill focused on right to repair. In an overwhelming 51-12 vote, the Digital Fair Repair Act is also pretty simple. Quoting from it, requiring OEMs to make available, for purposes of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair, to any independent digital repair provider or to the owner of digital electronic equipment manufactured by or on behalf of or sold by the OEM on fair and reasonable terms, documentation, parts, and tools, inclusive of any updates to information or embedded software. We will know soon on this bill. It needs to pass by Thursday to be in this legislative session. That said, also in New York, the bill that was passed to require ISPs to offer low-cost broadband was blocked by an injunction just before it was due to go into effect. So why do we care? For many small providers, a lot of these big congressional acts seem very far away. I do get it. It's the follow-on effects you care about. The U.S. government uses its buying power to effect change in a market because they are a very, very big customer. You may not be required to do these actions, but you'll find competitors who do them. We have guidance in nearly every stage here, draft on its way to passing, and just after, and the takeaway? The legal landscape is fast changing. How are you managing this ever-changing list? You knew we'd have to talk more security. So who's been breached? Well, Electronic Arts lost source code for games. Food supplier Edward Don had disrupted operations. McDonald's lost customer and employee information for U.S., South Korean, and Taiwanese customers. And clean energy company Invinergy was hacked and is indicating they will not be paying the ransom to Group Revel. The EA breach involved social engineering. The hackers tricked an employee over Slack to providing a login token. And the former COO of Securelytics, which supplies network security services for the healthcare industry, was charged with conducting an attack on a Georgia medical center. Why? For the purpose of commercial advantage and private financial gain. The Adidon ransomware gang has shut down their operations. They've given their decryption keys to Bleeping Computer. Quoting them, ransomware negotiation firms and incident responders saw a mad rush by Adidon over the past few days to finalize ransom payments from existing unpaid victims. The thinking? Increased pressure from law enforcement and governments is why they shut down. Which sectors are being breached? The Herjavec Group says 32% of the victims on data leak websites in the first 2 quarters of the year fell broadly into the manufactured goods category. That's double the number of tech firms and IT service providers at 18%. And how are they getting in? Well, New Spire is reporting a 1,900% jump against Fortinet VPNs and 1,500% jump against Pulse Secure ones in their new 2021 Q1 Threat Landscape Report. Apple is testing a passwordless authentication called Passkeys as part of its iCloud keychain. Adapting existing WebAuthn technology does require developers to implement it. This joins Microsoft and Google in their efforts to go passwordless. Microsoft revealed some information about their compromise recovery security practice team. This professional services emergency team is usually only publishing internal information, but with the rise in attack, Microsoft is revealing more about them. A generally reactive and travel-focused team, they focus on securing and restoring the highest risk assets, Azure Active Directory, Exchange, and certificate authorities. They focus on 3 functions. Compromise recovery, which is giving customers back control of their environment after a compromise. Rapid ransomware recovery, restoring business-critical applications and limiting ransomware impact. And advanced threat hunting, proactively hunting for the presence of advanced threat actors within an environment. So why do we care? That Microsoft model is clearly a solid one for professional services organizations. It's also very, very hard to do. If the question we keep asking is, what can we do differently? I feel like pushing for passwordless solutions, funding law enforcement, and adding financial and responsibility incentives to prevention are the keys. And like the services offerings, they're hard to do. Then again, if it was easy, it would be done by now, and none of it nearly as profitable. That data highlighting the number of quitters in the workplace reported last week, it's probably going to get worse. Surveys reported by Axios are showing anywhere from 25% to over 40% of workers are thinking about quitting their jobs. It's being called the Great Resignation. And this level of looking for change isn't isolated to just workers. The Information's Jessica Lesin is even commenting on how it's being reported among founders and CEOs in the startup community. That pushback continues to draw change. Amazon has changed their tune on remote work, guiding employees to a 2 days remote, 3 days in the office approach in a new update. The company specifically cites learning and evolving as we go. Andreessen Horowitz recently surveyed 226 startups in its portfolio and found that 2/3 of portfolio companies are looking at a similar hybrid approach as their larger counterparts. In fact, 87 were thinking about 1 to 2 days a week, with 64% looking at no office at all, and only gathering for company offsites. By contrast, just 18 said they wouldn't allow any work from home. And why? Data from Limeade showed 100% of employees surveyed in France, Germany, the UK, Australia, and the US are anxious about returning to the workplace. 77% cited being exposed to COVID-19 as their top source of anxiety, 71% are concerned about less flexibility, and 58% are anxious about commuting to work. So why do we care? Anxious workers asking questions about their own careers and coming out of a traumatic period wondering what they want next from life. No wonder this feels like a constantly changing landscape. The common thread here that's unstated is that investment in people and culture. The work from home feelings are the symptoms, not the cause. Savvy employers are going to be finding ways to take care of their existing people and build a coherent culture new ones want to work in. And that's the reason we care, not the specifics of 2 days a week versus 3. If you have the culture that supports flexibility, the rest comes more naturally. How about some market stats? I love some good ones. IoT is way up. Shipments of cellular IoT modules increased by 14% in 2020 to a new record of 303 million. That includes a slower revenue growth at only 8%. This all despite chip shortages. Or how about global smartphones? Canalys says that area will grow 12% this year, again despite shortages. Another tidbit, 32% of all 5G devices shipped will cost less than $300. How about data management? 96% of IT organizations are operating at or over capacity, and 93% of respondents to the Ascend.io survey said the number of data pipelines will increase. Why do we care? In an industry we always assume is in constant change, it's important to have that backed up by data. Despite chip shortages, technology is selling. More devices also means more data, and that inherent security risk that goes with that. Data management services will be increasingly in demand. Is it a recurring service or a consulting opportunity? The answer is yes. And some more around cyber insurance. Cyber insurance and security company Coalition has partnered with Intuit to deliver comprehensive cyber insurance coverage to protect businesses against ransomware, phishing, and other cybersecurity threats, according to a statement from the companies. Wired has a piece on insurance, and the core is that insurance companies do keep paying out. Would a ban on ransomware payments stop them? Fines on payment could just become a premium on the payment. So why do we care? I have a working theory that insurance companies will be influencing the market, and I stand by it. The area they will be changing is the floor. SMBs and SMBs won't be able to get insurance at affordable rates without some level of basic competence over time. Insurance companies are built for risk management, and they'll build tests to determine acceptable risk. No 2FA, unsafe vendors, too much on-prem software, too much legacy, all those risks will result in higher premiums because the insurers will know what to ask for. And that's how they'll impact the change to come. Some good news for providers. 2/3 of UK organizations expect to outsource at the same level or more over the next 2 years. Quoting Computer Weekly, in total, 65% of all respondents said they will continue to outsource at the same rate or will outsource more, with a third planning to increase their outsourcing, while only 16% said they'll outsource less. 2/3 at 66% of respondents to the survey said cost reduction was their number one driver for IT outsourcing, while increased scalability to business needs was cited as a reason by 56%, some 10% more than last year. Just over half, 51%, said IT outsourcing was seen as a means of enabling them to focus on their core business. They're happy too. 89% of the relationships are being rated well. Cloud provider satisfaction is higher though. They're at 96%. Despite that, a PwC survey says about half, 53% of companies, aren't realizing substantial value from cloud investments. That said, roughly 80% of technology products and services will be built by those who are not technology professionals by 2024, says Gartner. It added that the current total of business-led IT spend averages up to 36% of the total formal IT budget, and that technology providers are now finding themselves increasingly entering markets related to or in competition with non-technology providers. So why do we care? It's my story time. IT outsourcing is popular, will continue to grow. Cloud providers are more popular, and there's more potential in those investments still to come. And the technology world will not be driven by IT professionals. Sounds like all the reasons to be moving into business outcomes to me. It's the context that matters. On their own, those data points about outsourcing could be taken as the good news. Things are going well. Celebrate. Instead, know that the landscape is changing too. The outsourced work is only a small piece of what technology is being developed and implemented, and you'd better adapt to change with that. Thinking about data some more, the Supreme Court has declined to take LinkedIn's case with HIQ Labs in a dispute about scraping data that's publicly accessible on the internet. The High Court has ordered the appeals court to hear the case again in light of its recent ruling, pulling from Axios. LinkedIn argues that the upstart rival shouldn't be able to scrape public profiles on its site to gather the vast amount of information it provides on people's work history and other business-related data. A federal appeals had sided with HIQ, but Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court will send things back to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, why do we care? Open questions about what is public information, what data brokers can do, and what mass scraping means are the debate here. We may not have a data privacy set of laws in the US, but we do in terms of case law. This one will determine some of who owns that data and what's public. That's why we care. Want to ask, why do we care? T-shirts, stickers, water bottles, and even aprons. Pick up some of our great stuff at the link in the description below and support the show directly. I want to highlight a specific Microsoft story. Their CISO, Brett Arsenault, has outlined in an interview their change in approach to passwords. His key moment of success? Being cheered once at the company when he killed off the policy of changing passwords every 71 days. It was the only time he's ever been publicly cheered. I remember we had a motto to get MFA everywhere. In hindsight, that was the right security goal, but the wrong approach. Make this about the user outcome, so transition to, we want to eliminate passwords. But the words you use matter. It turned out that simple language shift changed the culture and the view of what we were trying to accomplish, he said. Today, 99.9% of our users don't enter the passwords in their environment, he added. Of note, only 18% of Microsoft's customers have enabled MFA. Now, why do we care? I talk about the use of language all the time. The key quote here, by changing the way they talked about the policy, everything shifted. The tech industry should focus on getting rid of passwords. That's something users can get behind, something security professionals can get behind, and that's doing something different. I saved the political stuff for today. The G7 earlier this week asked Russia to disrupt those ransomware gangs operating within its borders. Quoting the statement, "We call on Russia to identify, disrupt, and hold to account those within its borders who conduct ransomware attacks, abuse virtual currency to launder ransoms, and other cybercrime." NATO issued their joint communique as well. They've equated cyber attacks as the same as mounting an armed attack. This indicates that a cyber attack could lead to the invocation of Article 5. And President Biden and Russia's President Putin had their much-anticipated meeting. While Putin continued to deny Russia's involvement in the ransomware attacks, the two not only put ambassadors back into place, they also decided to organize meetings of experts to hold consultations on cybersecurity, in particular on which types of infrastructure should be considered out of bounds or off limits to disruptive cyber attacks. I'm going to also link to an article that dives into the why for Russian hackers, and not surprisingly, it's about economic opportunity. Now, why do we care? There was never going to be an instant off switch from the Russians on this issue. What happened instead was at least single forward movement towards some change. We can hope for slightly less high-profile attacks, and understand that operationally, not much will change tomorrow and probably not the day after that either. At best, this is some long-term help. It at least matters that governments are now looking at these attacks. That's why we care. The profile is high enough now that law enforcement is going to be involved. So we care because the issue is clearly now that important. Which leads to some more security news. Microsoft is warning about a series of attacks that use SEO poisoning to infect systems. Thousands of PDFs stuffed with SEO keywords start a series of redirections that lead to the malware. The enticement? Free office forms like invoices, questionnaires, and resumes. The company has also disrupted a business email compromise campaign which used legacy protocols like IMAP and POP3 to go around MFA, targeting Exchange Online. And it isn't small scale. BEC scammers are another avenue of revenue. If you're thinking about opening a ransomware business, the source code for the Paradise ransomware was released on a hacking forum. It's only available to active users, however. Comments within the code are in Russian. A U.S. nuclear weapons contractor was hit by Revil. They claim to have stolen data, which they are now auctioning off. It's also come out that the Teamsters were hit back in 2019, but they refused to pay, despite FBI advice to do so, and they rebuilt their network instead. Their insurance company had made that recommendation, and they pulled 99% of their data from archived materials, and in some cases, hard copies. And too many tools may be the problem. The attackers themselves use common tools and thus make them a lot less likely to be spotted. This per Sophos' Active Advisory Playbook 2021 report. Blocking threats automatically means it may not be followed up on and may be part of a larger attack pattern. It's reflected in software sprawl too. There are an average of 96 unique applications per device, including 13 mission-critical applications on the average endpoint device today. Software client sprawl on endpoints is increasing, growing to an average of 11.7 software clients or security controls per endpoint device in 2021. Nearly two-thirds of endpoint devices, 66%, also have 2 or more encryption apps installed. Evidence discloses that 60% of devices have 2 or more encryption apps installed, and 52% have 3 or more endpoint management tools installed, while 11% have 2 or more identity access management clients installed. And in case you thought this was a North American and European problem, Ensign InfoSecurity published data findings highlighting similar threat actors across Asia-Pacific, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and South Korea. CyberReason has released a report which examines all of the ransomware attacks across multiple companies, and the findings show that cyber insurance just doesn't cover the losses, even when it does cover the ransomware. Some 54% of the cyber pros who responded said their organization had bought a cyber insurance policy that covered ransomware in the past 2 years, versus 24% who bought one that did not. Of those that were subsequently attacked and extorted by a ransomware crew, 42% said their insurer covered only a portion of the losses. The Washington Post covered that too. Prices for at least half of insurance buyers went up 10 to 30% in late 2020. Quoting the piece, underwriters are demanding to see detailed proof of clients' cybersecurity measures in ways they've never done before. For example, not using multi-factor authentication, which requires a user to verify themselves in multiple ways, might result in a rejection. Many insurers are also restricting how much cyber coverage they can offer or limiting the terms and conditions, several industry executives have said. In some cases, that means slashing the amount of reimbursement that can be used specifically for ransomware attacks. And ready for the worst news? 80% of organizations that paid ransom demands experienced a second attack, of which 46% believe came from the same attackers. This from data by Censuswide. Why do we care? Go Teamsters, tip of the cap for that one. So, you're breached, insurance won't cover the whole damage, and you're really likely to get hit again, even if you pay. It's getting harder to get insurance, and too many tools might even be making it worse. My theme continues to be rethink this problem, finding ways to simplify your customers' environments, address the basics better, and don't take the unnecessary risks. You should have your do not cross lines, because the insurance companies have theirs now. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.